現在、カナダ国内には数多くの日系団体があります。生活、文化、事業、さまざまな分野に関わる組織に数多くの人々が参加しています。以降2回にわたり、国内8つの組織を紹介します。
The one thing that we've been very fortunate in Ottawa is that it's a small community, and therefore the likelihoods of groups, small cadres separating out and forming their own group was fairly small. And we've been very fortunate in that whenever people like, we've got a group called Akebono, and they're basically a group of ladies from Japan who want to get together socially because they're comfortable speaking Japanese to each other. And they come under the guise or the umbrella of our community association. And so we've been very fortunate in having people, young people coming from Japan. Now these people have been a very strong contributor to our own cultural center board because they've become actively involved in our community. And B, they bring something that the Canadian-born Japanese don't really have. They have an ability to speak the language, and they at least have a working knowledge of some of the Japanese cultural activities. We've had large contributions in our own community from non-Japanese people. And I guess if you're looking to the future, I'm assuming that that's the kind of makeup that we have. All we become are we're managers of a facility. And all we try to do is to attract people that have got some ideas relating to Japanese cultural activities that we could then support and hopefully try to get other people interested in pursuing it. So that's basically the way the community looks right now. There's always a fear that, 5 years, 10 years from now, we're going to have a facility which is not being used at all. But the hope is right now, it's going on very much like it had been in the 90s and in the 2000s. And hopefully it'll go on like this for a number of years. But somewhere along the way, we're going to have some additional stimuli to get things going again. So we're at that stage now where we're sitting there thinking, how do you encourage people to come out? Do you aim at people with a Japanese background, or do you aim at people with a Japanese Canadian background, or do you aim at the non-Japanese population generally? And my own feeling is that I think in the future, to make a culture center as ours grow, you have to appeal to the larger audience, that is the larger population within the community. So we have to aim at what might interest non-Japanese people in coming and using the facilities and coming and using whatever cultural activities that we develop. We have Mochitsuki in early December, and this is again, it's a gathering of our community members that don't normally show up to activities, but they bring their young families and their grandchildren out to the Mochitsuki, and so we can get people numbering in the order of over 300, 400 people, which is in the location, as you can see, we don't do it here. We rent space in an Italian soccer club facility, and they've been very good to us over the years, and the space is adequate. We have, within our cultural center group itself, we have a program where we try to have cooking classes, and we have craft workshops, and so that's our contribution to the cultural milieu of the city. And these are reasonably well supported, quite often by the same people, but we get people that are non-Japanese that are interested in these things, and they'll come out. But fortunately, we've had very determined and strong-minded people from Japan who also have taken on these leadership, especially for the association, for the OJCA. We've had very good people from Japan, young people. And when I say young, I mean less than 50. but people that have come from Japan and taken a leadership role and taken an active part in becoming affiliated with the national body. People like myself, when the whole question came up, again, I said, you know, why get to, we've got problems enough of our own. But these people had enough vision that they said, look, if ever there are any major problems that affect the whole community, by becoming a part of a national body is a lot better than just being a local body. And they're right.
It's a little bit different from a lot of, I think, other cultural centers, and that it's not a community center, but it's a cultural center. And one of the important pieces of the JCCC's mandate was to teach all Canadians and to share Japanese Canadian or Japanese culture and Japanese Canadian heritage with all Canadians. So I think there are incredible lessons implicit in the Japanese Canadian history that are just as valuable in the political climate we see today as it was in the 1940s. So that's essentially what the Cultural Center exists to do. The motto has always been friendship through culture, and to be honest, it's that inclusiveness that is the reason that the Japanese Canadian Cultural Center has continued to grow over the last 50 years. And we continue to see that. This center gets larger and more active and more sort of vibrant, we like to think, every year. We do annual festivals, things like a summer festival, spring festival. We do a festival in the autumn called the Road to Asia, where the community shares this building with all of the other different Asian communities and does a big Pan-Asian festival. We also do a festival at New Year's. We do an annual bazaar. So there are a lot of those sorts of things that started 40, 50 years ago when the first cultural center was built, and those traditions continue. There's also a lot of regular courses and programs that go on here in Japanese language. As you know, a lot of Japanese Canadians following the internment, their parents did not pass the language on to the next generation. So a lot of them are sort of third and fourth generation Japanese Canadians reconnecting with the language, and then a lot of other Canadians just with an interest in things Japanese. So people who are interested in contemporary Japanese culture, manga, anime, and they want to be able to have better access, I guess, through the language. We have about 4,000, slightly under 4,500 members. We have 200,000 visitors annually. And we also do programs for school children that introduce them to Japanese culture and a little bit about the history of this community. And we have about 15,000 school kids coming annually for those programs as well. So traditional Japanese arts like flower arrangement, calligraphy, brush painting. We do regular film screenings. We do an annual Toronto Japanese Film Festival. That was a new and very big event. We brought in 12 films that were all either Canadian or North American premieres, and we kind of surprised ourselves. We had about 4,000 people come for 12 films. So we have an incredibly active heritage committee that are running heritage and art shows in the gallery regularly, putting together the SEDI project, and again, rarely a few weeks goes by without some kind of event or workshop very specific to the history of the community. We also do regular workshops in things like shiatsu and cooking and Japanese music. We do regular Japanese performances, some from the community like the kohaku, red and white singing show that's just been going on for about 30 years here. But a lot of performers come in from Japan as well. And in our Kobayashi Hall, we've had a lot of concerts with Japanese pop groups, as well as Canadian artists, and then traditional Japanese performers from Japan, things like No Theater, Kabuki, Kyogen, Gagaku, etc. Traditional Japanese puppet theater and taiko, etc. So it's a busy place, and it continues to get busier.
We've always had a very active seniors group here, and they basically were the ones who originally came here to Winnipeg from Vancouver, and so they were a very supportive group of each other and of everyone who came along. And so they decided that they needed a meeting place. They used to get together in people's homes and whatnot, and they amassed quite a bit of equipment themselves, tables, chairs, this sort of thing, and they had it stored in various people's homes because they always felt they would like to get a place where, they can have all this equipment and so on. So they initiated looking for some place for the community, and along with members of the JCA, the Manitoba Japanese Canadian Citizens Association, who existed at that time for community. And together they finally located a small building. It was an old bank building, and so our initial cultural center started there. But after a few years it became too small for us because our center was very active. So we moved here then, and through Redress Foundation we were able to purchase this property. It was an old Suzuki dealership, but it was a very good location because it has the parking lot and so on, and we renovated the interior then. And we kept adding to it. We built on a small gym in the back then, so that all of these martial arts groups in the community could come and practice here. And so we tried to be inclusive of a number of groups, for our community. And this became a focal point for our community then. And we've had a really close relationship with Setagaya, which is Winnipeg's sister city. So we've had many events and visits from groups from Setagaya that our center has been involved with, and we've worked with the city of Winnipeg to plan some of their visits and trips. It's always been fairly stable in that our numbers don't grow that much. Most people, if they emigrate, they go to Vancouver or Toronto. So we've always been a very small community, but very active, and very actively supportive of the center and of the activities of the community at large. So I know even in the past, when we didn't have the center, people in the community always supported all the main groups. So if the Buddhist church had a bazaar, everybody would attend and go to that. If the United Church had a bazaar, everybody would go to that and support. So it's always been very supportive and a very, close-knit group, But we are already into the Sansei, so I mean, we're into Yonsei Gosei even, and that's the difficult challenge, I think, is to keep those younger people coming and being a part of the community. And, I think the face of our community is evolving and changing. We are a community that is so assimilated. We have the highest intermarriage rate of anyone in this country. It's at 98% or whatever. And so, to bring in all of these people and to keep this community going too is a challenge. I know that we do have many of the spouses coming and joining, and helping out. But so it's a major challenge for us to bring in the youth, especially too. You know, and the younger people, you know, they're involved with their families, they have young children, you know, their children are involved in sports, music, whatever. So it's hard to get them to commit to coming here, you know, but they do support and they do come out for events, you know, where they will help out with a single event or this sort of thing, but not sort of an ongoing commitment, you know. So that's the difficult part, you know, is to get, but we are lucky in that we do have hundreds of volunteers who help us with many of our things, like our schools program and so on. And many of the newcomers are helping with the language program. And, you know, shortly after redress, I know that the Chinese Canadian group and the Ukrainian group were also, you know, very actively seeking some kind of redress for themselves. And our communities then supported them a lot. The Aboriginal groups, our communities have become very involved with a lot of the Aboriginal issues. The National Association has written letters to ministers on their behalf. So it's been an ongoing, very active support of the other groups. And I think that many in our community feel that it is up to us to help support others as well. And we did receive a lot of support from the greater community, and that we should also be returning that support.
They've had membership, I think last year, of up to 70 people. And a large number of those are young people, like people I would say under 35, anywhere from early 20s to, you know, mid 30s. Some come as singles and some as couples. Some have married, you know, Canadians, non-Japanese Canadians. So it has grown a lot, yeah. And the profile has changed. You know, you're seeing younger people, and I think that's because of the economic situation in Japan, and because here in the Yukon they have a Yukon nominee program. It's like people can eventually, probably within 2 years, get permanent status so they can work. There's an interesting group of women that have been meeting for, probably, I'd say 2 or 3 years, 3 years maybe. And a small group, you know, 6, 8, 10 maybe at the most. And she did some teaching and did workshops for the public. So, you know, that was really interesting. So they actually practice the ceremony, serving the tea and receiving the tea, and then there's other peripheral things related to it, like you know, you could get into wearing the kimono properly and how to dress properly, the sweets, you know, making the sweets. So we made an agreement that she would teach me how to make these Japanese sweets, and I would show her how to do some more Western baking. So, wow. You know. I would say that they're involved or they're integrated very much into sort of the work situation, you know, and I think people accept them. You know, I haven't heard about difficulties that way. So I think from that point of view, but I think for some of the younger people whose maybe their English is not as advanced, it's more difficult for them. Right. You know, some of them are taking classes at the college, you know, English classes. So they would probably, in some ways, stick together, right. But they tend to, you know, mix with other groups. It could be, you know, French Canadians, it could be Filipinos, you know, yeah, they're mixing all the time because the community is so small. You know, you're getting out there and doing things, and you have to be able to speak English, you know, to make your way. So I think that in a way it's kind of a forced forced integration. It started out really with curiosity about Jojita Wada, because I wanted to do, being the human rights educator, I wanted to use that as a way to talk about discrimination and you know, issues around discrimination and increasing awareness of Asians in the Yukon, and that we're not all new immigrants. You know, some of us have been here for a while and born here, and you know, have been contributing to the development of the Yukon. So that's why I think it's important to share those stories of those early pioneers, because they were integrated into the community. They contributed to the community. They had businesses. They weren't just helpers. You know, they weren't just you know, laborers. They did run businesses and other things. So they had a lot of different roles in the community. And then once I found out about Masa Sakata and I looked at those beautiful pictures, photos of Asian people, it made me curious about, okay, who are these people? What's their story? And I mean, there's some fascinating stories there. And I think it's important that heritage, that history, be reflected in history that's taught in the schools. That people are, that the general public are aware that, you know, Asians and Black Canadians have been part of the development of this country. I guess for me personally, Japanese Canadian history is important to talk about that from a human rights perspective and from a non-discrimination, social justice perspective. So I use stories as a way to teach about human rights. So this is what happened to somebody way back when. You know, what lessons does it have for us today? You know, basically that's the bottom line, right? And I think people listen better to stories. They're more interested in kind of a personal storyline, and it kind of, you know, has an emotional impact on people. So I like using stories, and I think it's important to document them and share them as much as possible. They can teach us lessons for the future.